What would you do if the ghost of your past didn't just knock on your door but tried to buy his way back into your life? For 9 years, a single mother fought to build a world for her son, a world free from the man who vanished without a trace. But one rainy Tuesday, he returned. He wasn't the boy she once loved. He was a titan of industry with an offer that could change everything overnight. This isn't a story about forgiveness. It's a story about the price of peace, the weight of secrets, and the terrifying choice between a comfortable lie and a painful truth. The rain against the window of their third-floor apartment was a familiar rhythm, a constant companion to the quiet life Lena Petrova had painstakingly built. It was a Tuesday night in Portland, which meant cheap ramen, Leo's half-finished calculus homework spread across the small dining table, and the low hum of the aging refrigerator. This was their world, a fortress of routine constructed from the rubble of a life that had ended 9 years ago. Leo, now a lanky 16-year-old with his mother's thoughtful eyes and a jawline that was starting to sharpen in a way that made Lena's breath catch, looked up from his textbook. "Mom, do you know what the integral of e to the power of x is?" "The same thing it was yesterday, sweetie," Lena smiled, stirring the pot. "It's its own derivative and its own integral, the narcissist of functions." Leo chuckled, a deep, warm sound that filled the small space. "Right, the narcissist." That was when the knock came. It wasn't the timid tap of their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, nor the boisterous pounding of Leo's friend, Sam. This was a solid, deliberate sound. 3 distinct raps against the wood, confident and out of place. Lena's brow furrowed. They weren't expecting anyone. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, motioning for Leo to stay put. Peering through the peephole, her world tilted on its axis. The distorted fish-eye view showed a man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair slicked back from his forehead, raindrops glistening on his broad shoulders. His face was leaner, etched with lines of stress and authority that hadn't been there a decade ago, but it was unmistakably him, Nathaniel Sterling. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. 9 years, 4 months, and 12 days. Not a call, not a letter, not a single dollar of child support. He had evaporated from their lives like a phantom, and now he was standing on her doormat. She took a shaky breath and opened the door, leaving the chain on. "What do you want, Nathaniel?" Her voice was colder and steadier than she felt. He didn't flinch. His gaze, a cool, calculating grey, met hers. "Hello, Lena. May I come in? It's been a long time." "Not long enough," she shot back. "You have no right to be here." "I think I do," he said, his voice a low baritone that still held a ghost of the warmth she once loved. His eyes flickered past her, into the apartment, and landed on Leo, who was now standing, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning recognition from the few faded photographs Lena kept in a box. "I want to see my son." The protective fury that had been her fuel for nearly a decade surged. "Your son? You lost that privilege when you walked out on a pregnant woman with nothing but a note and a guilty conscience." "I know how it looked," he said, and for the first time a crack appeared in his composure. "It was complicated. Please, Lena, 5 minutes for him." It was the sight of Leo's face, pale and wide-eyed, that made her decision. This wasn't just about her anger anymore. She slid the chain off and stepped back, her body rigid. 5 minutes. Nathaniel stepped inside, and the small apartment seemed to shrink around him. He brought with him the scent of expensive cologne, rain, and something else, power. It radiated from him, a stark contrast to their worn furniture and second-hand books. His eyes locked on Leo. "Leo," he said, his voice thick with an emotion Lena couldn't decipher. "I'm your father." Leo was frozen, a statue of teenage disbelief. He looked from the stranger in the immaculate suit to his mother's stony face. "Mom." "It's true, honey," she said softly, hating him for this, for forcing this moment on them in their sanctuary. Nathaniel took a hesitant step forward. "I know I don't deserve to be here. I know I have a lot to answer for, but I'm here now, and I want to change things." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a thick, pristine envelope, placing it on the cluttered table next to Leo's homework. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm offering you a future." Lena stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. "We don't want your money, Nathaniel." "It's not just money," he said, his gaze fixed on her. "It's a house, Lena, a fully paid-for house in the West Hills, a trust fund for Leo that will cover any university in the world, a career, anything he wants. It's a clean slate, a new life." The room was silent, save for the drumming rain and the thudding of Lena's heart. He wasn't just visiting, he was invading. He was trying to bulldoze 9 years of struggle and sacrifice with a checkbook. He wasn't just changing the conversation, he was trying to change their entire reality, overnight. "Why?" Lena's voice was a whisper, but it cut through the tension. "After all this time, why now?" Nathaniel's gaze was intense, a storm of hidden motives and unspoken history. "Because it's time, and because I need you to listen to what I have to say." The weight of the envelope on the table was immense. It was a physical manifestation of the chasm that had opened up in their lives the moment Nathaniel Sterling walked through the door. After he left, promising to call the next day to discuss the particulars, a suffocating silence filled the apartment. The ramen sat untouched, its steam long gone. Leo was the first to speak, his voice barely audible. Is that really him?" Lena sank into one of the rickety dining chairs, her legs suddenly unable to support her. She nodded, unable to look at her son. "Yes. He looks old," Leo said, a strange observation that was profoundly true. The carefree, reckless boy of 24 Lena remembered was gone, replaced by a hardened 33-year-old man who wore his wealth like armor. 9 years is a long time, she murmured. Leo tentatively reached out and touched the envelope. The paper was thick, creamy, and embossed with the logo of a law firm she'd never heard of. A house? A trust fund? "Mom, is this real?" The hope in his voice was a knife in her heart. For 9 years she had worked 2 jobs, mornings as a paralegal in a small downtown firm, evenings and weekends waitressing to keep them afloat. Their life was a constant, careful balancing act of rent, bills and groceries. She had patched Leo's jeans, bought his textbooks second-hand, and saved for months to afford a new pair of basketball shoes. She had given him stability, love and security, but she could never give him this. The sheer, effortless power to erase financial worry. "I don't know," she lied, because she knew it was real. Nathaniel never bluffed, not about money. Her mind reeled back to the past, a place she hadn't let herself visit in years. She remembered Nathaniel not as the corporate titan in her living room, but as a passionate art history student who quoted poets and promised her a life of adventure. They had met in a university library, 2 scholarship kids from different worlds. She fell for his charm, his fierce intelligence, his rebellion against the family he never spoke of. It was only after they were married, after she was pregnant, that the gilded cage began to reveal itself. His family, the Sterlings of Seattle, were old money, a dynasty built on shipping and logistics. They hadn't disowned him for marrying a penniless nobody. They had simply ignored her, their silence a weapon far more cruel than any overt hostility. She remembered the one and only time she met his mother, Eleanor Sterling. The woman's handshake was limp and cold, her eyes scanning Lena's simple dress with an air of profound disappointment. The note Nathaniel left behind had been agonizingly brief. "They've given me an ultimatum. It's the family business or you. I can't drag you and the baby into their world. It would destroy you. I'm so sorry. I'll always love you." A coward's excuse. He had chosen wealth over them. He had chosen power over his own child. And now he was back, offering them a piece of that power. It felt like a trap. "We can't accept it," she said, the words tasting like ash. Leo looked up, his face a canvas of confusion and hurt. "Why not?" "Mom, do you know what this could mean? You could quit the restaurant. You wouldn't have to be so tired all the time. I could go to MIT, to Stanford. I wouldn't have to worry about scholarships or student loans." "It's not that simple, Leo," she insisted, her voice rising with a panic she couldn't control. "Money from him. It comes with strings. It always does." "What strings?" Leo pressed, standing up. "The string where you get to sleep more than 5 hours a night? The string where I can focus on school without worrying if the car will break down again? He owes us. He owes you." The raw truth of his words silenced her. He was right. Nathaniel owed them a debt that could never be repaid. But this felt less like a payment and more like a purchase. He was trying to buy back a piece of the life he had abandoned, and the thought filled her with a visceral rage. This wasn't about them. This was about him. It had to be. That night, sleep offered no escape. Lena tossed and turned, haunted by ghosts of the past and fears for the future. She saw Nathaniel's cool grey eyes, shadowed with secrets. What did he really want? Why now? People like him didn't act out of pure altruism. There was a motive, a hidden agenda ticking like a bomb beneath the surface of his generous offer. She thought of Leo's hopeful face. He saw a solution, a magical key to a brighter future. He didn't see the power imbalance, the years of betrayal, the psychological warfare that came with accepting anything from the Sterling family. He saw a father trying to make amends. She saw a predator circling back to the prey he had left for dead. The next morning, as she stared at her tired reflection in the bathroom mirror, she knew she was at a crossroads. Her pride, the armor that had protected her for so long, was screaming at her to tear up the documents, throw them in Nathaniel's face, and slam the door on him forever. But her love for her son, a fierce, all-consuming force, was whispering a more dangerous question. What if she was wrong to refuse? What if, by protecting him from his father, she was robbing him of a future he deserved? The gilded cage had been offered. The door was open, and Lena knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that walking away would be just as difficult as stepping inside. Nathaniel called at 10 a.m. the next day, his voice as crisp and professional as if he were scheduling a business meeting. He didn't ask if Lena had considered his offer. He assumed it. He wanted to see Leo. "He has school," Lena said, her hand gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles were white. "I know. I was thinking this Saturday. We could go to the Science Museum. I read that there's a new exhibit on robotics he might enjoy." The fact that he had researched her son's interests sent a jolt of both fear and a strange, unwelcome warmth through her. It was a calculated move, designed to show he was serious. It was working. "I'll have to ask him." "Of course," Nathaniel said smoothly. "Let him know I'll pick him up at 11. And Lena, the house is contingent on our ability to establish a relationship. The lawyers call it a good faith clause." There it was. The first string. Not just a gift, but a transaction. Her cooperation in exchange for her son's future. The power imbalance was sickeningly clear. She was no longer just a struggling single mother. She was a variable in a Sterling family equation. When she told Leo, his face lit up. The betrayal Lena felt was instantly warring with the joy she saw in her son. "The robotics exhibit? I read about that. Sam's dad was going to take us, but he had to work." He hesitated, his excitement dimming slightly as he looked at her worried face. "It's okay if you don't want me to go." "No," Lena said, the word feeling like a surrender. "You should go, get to know him, and find out what he really wants," she added silently. Saturday arrived under a sky the color of slate. At precisely 11, a glossy black sedan, so quiet it seemed to appear out of thin air, pulled up to their building. Nathaniel stepped out, this time dressed in expensive casual wear, a cashmere sweater and dark jeans that probably cost more than their monthly rent. From the window, Lena watched Leo walk out to meet him. The initial exchange was painfully awkward. There was no hug, just a stiff nod. Nathaniel opened the car door for his son, a formal, unfamiliar gesture. As the car pulled away, Lena felt a profound sense of loss, as if she had just handed her son over to a stranger from another planet. Nathaniel, for his part, was wrestling with his own demons. The 9 years he had spent climbing the corporate ladder at Sterling Industries, proving his worth to the family he had capitulated to, had hollowed him out. He knew how to command a boardroom, how to negotiate multi-million-dollar deals, but he had no idea how to talk to his own son. "So, robotics," he started, his eyes fixed on the road. "Yeah, it's cool," Leo replied, staring out the window. "I'm on the robotics team at school. We're building a bot for the state competition." This was a foothold. "Really? What kind of bot? What's its function?" Nathaniel asked, a genuine flicker of interest in his voice. He understood systems, engineering, objectives. This was a language he could speak. As Leo began to explain the complexities of motor torque, sensor arrays, and programming logic, the tension in the car began to dissolve. Nathaniel found himself impressed by the boy's intelligence and passion. This wasn't just a kid. He was a bright, articulate young man. "A Sterling," his mind whispered before he pushed the thought away. At the museum, Nathaniel followed Leo's lead. He watched as his son's eyes lit up at the complex machinery, as he engaged with the interactive displays with an unself-conscious enthusiasm. For the first time, Nathaniel saw the boy he had given up, and the reality of his loss hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had missed everything. First steps, first words, first day of school, first lost tooth. He was a ghost trying to inhabit a life that had moved on without him. He tried to bridge the gap the only way he knew how. "If you like this, you should see the R&D labs at Sterling. We're developing automated systems for our port logistics. Fully autonomous cranes, drone surveyors." "Wow, really?" Leo's eyes widened. "I could arrange a tour for you if you'd like. You could meet the lead engineers." It was an offer of access, of privilege. It was also a test. But Leo didn't see the subtext. He just saw an incredible opportunity. That would be amazing. Later, sitting in a sterile museum cafe, Nathaniel made another clumsy attempt. "The house I mentioned, it has a 3-car garage. You could convert part of it into a workshop. I'd make sure you had all the best equipment, anything you need." He was offering things, tools, opportunities. He was trying to build a bridge out of money and influence because he didn't have the raw materials of shared memories or earned trust. Leo looked down at his soda. "That's really generous." He paused, then looked up, his gaze direct and unnervingly perceptive. "Why are you doing all this? Now?" The question hung in the air between them. Nathaniel had a prepared answer, a carefully constructed narrative about regret and wanting to do the right thing. But looking into the face of his son, a face that was a mirror of his own at that age, the lie felt cheap and hollow. "Because I made a terrible mistake," Nathaniel said, the confession raw and unplanned. "I chose my family's expectations over my own. I was a coward. And I've regretted it every single day for 9 years. It was the most honest thing he had said since he'd arrived. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was a part of it, a genuine piece of his broken past offered up as a fragile truce. Leo didn't respond for a long time. He just watched his father, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Nathaniel felt a terrifying certainty that the boy would see right through him, that he would reject him completely. But then, Leo gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Okay," he said softly. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't acceptance, but it was a start. It was the first tentative step onto the bridge Nathaniel was so desperately trying to build. While Leo was navigating the strange new territory of having a father, Lena was waging a war on her own. The unease that had settled in her gut since Nathaniel's return had sharpened into suspicion. His confession to Leo, which her son dutifully recounted, felt too polished, too neat. Regret was a powerful emotion, but was it powerful enough to resurrect a man after 9 years of silence? She didn't buy it. Her paralegal skills, long relegated to drafting wills and filing divorce papers for a small-time family lawyer, were rusty but intact. On Monday, after dropping Leo at school, she went not to her own office, but to the downtown public library. Her small firm's internet access was limited, but here she had the world at her fingertips. She started with a simple search: Sterling Industries. The results were a deluge of corporate speak and polished press releases. Sterling Industries was one of the largest private logistics companies on the West Coast, a behemoth of shipping containers, freight lines, and cutting-edge port technology. The CEO was listed as Eleanor Sterling. Nathaniel was the chief operating officer, the heir apparent. The articles painted a picture of a legacy company thriving in the modern age. But Lena knew that the real story was never in the press releases. It was in the financial news, buried in the jargon-heavy reports she had learned to decipher. She dug deeper, searching for financial statements, analyst reports, and industry gossip. It took her 3 hours, but she found it. A well-respected financial blog had posted a speculative piece 2 months ago under the headline, "Is the Sterling Empire Showing Cracks?" The article detailed a series of risky, high-leverage expansion projects over the last 5 years, all spearheaded by Nathaniel. A new, fully automated port in Asia had been a catastrophic failure, plagued by local political instability and massive cost overruns. A strategic investment in a new shipping technology had been rendered obsolete by a competitor's innovation. Sterling Industries, the article alleged, was dangerously overextended. They were bleeding money, and their creditors were getting nervous. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't about regret. This was about survival. She kept digging. She found another piece about a potential merger with a massive international conglomerate, a deal that could save the company. But the conglomerate was notoriously risk-averse. They would only acquire a stable, family-run business with a clear line of succession. A clear line of succession. The words echoed in her mind. Nathaniel was the heir, but he was unmarried and, as far as the world knew, childless. A 33-year-old bachelor at the helm of a struggling family dynasty was not a symbol of stability, but a man with a son, an heir to carry on the Sterling name. That was different. That was legacy. That was security. Leo wasn't a son to be reclaimed. He was an asset to be leveraged. The betrayal was so profound, so cynical, it left her breathless. He wasn't just offering them a gilded cage. He was trying to put Leo inside it to fatten him up for a corporate sacrifice. The house, the trust fund, it was a signing bonus. That evening, the rage simmering inside her was a toxic brew. When Leo came home, buzzing with excitement about the potential tour of the Sterling R&D labs, she could barely look at him. He said he'd introduce me to Dr. Aris Thorne. She's like a legend in robotic AI, Leo gushed, pulling a carton of milk from the fridge. Leo, we need to talk, Lena said, her voice tight. She laid it all out for him. The financial trouble, the failed projects, the potential merger. She explained the concept of succession, of how having an heir could make the company look more stable to investors. Leo listened, his expression slowly shifting from excitement to confusion, and then to a defensive anger. So you think this is all fake? That he's just using me? I think it's his primary motivation, yes, Lena said bluntly. The timing is too perfect. He ignores you for 9 years and then shows up, waving a fortune, right when his company is about to go under. It's not a coincidence. Or maybe his company going under made him realize what's important, Leo shot back, his voice rising. Maybe facing failure made him think about his real life, about us. You don't know that. Oh, I think I do, Lena said, her voice laced with the bitterness of her own history with his family. I know the Sterlings. They don't have realizations, Leo. They make calculations. Everything is a transaction. You hate him so much you can't even consider that he might be telling the truth, Leo accused, his face flushed. He admitted he was a coward. He was honest with me. It was a calculated honesty. He told you a piece of the truth to win your trust. They were standing in the middle of their small kitchen, shouting at each other for the first time in years. Their fortress of two was being breached, and the enemy wasn't just Nathaniel, it was the hope he represented. Lena saw a lie, a manipulation. Leo saw a chance, a father. "You're just scared, Mom," Leo said, his voice dropping to a low, wounded tone. "You're so used to us struggling that you can't accept anything good. He's trying, and you're not even giving him a chance." Before Lena could respond, he retreated to his room and shut the door. The sound echoed the finality of the door that had closed on her own heart 9 years ago. She was left alone in the silence, the damning financial report still open on her laptop screen. She had the facts, the evidence of Nathaniel's hidden motives. But facts were cold and sterile. They were no match for a 16-year-old boy's yearning for a father. She had exposed the whispers of the past, but in doing so, she feared she had just started a new war. A war for the heart of her own son. A week later, the other shoe dropped. It came in the form of a phone call, not from Nathaniel, but from a crisp female voice that identified herself as Eleanor Sterling's assistant. The Queen herself was requesting an audience. "She would like to meet with you for lunch tomorrow," the assistant said, the tone suggesting it was not a request, but a summons. "A car will pick you up at noon." Lena's first instinct was to refuse, to tell the corporate royalty of Seattle that she was not one of their subjects. But she knew this was a confrontation she couldn't avoid. This was the source of the poison, the woman who had orchestrated Nathaniel's departure all those years ago. If she wanted to understand the full scope of the game being played, she had to face the Queen. The car that arrived was, of course, a black Mercedes. The driver, a stoic man in a black suit, held the door for her as if she were a visiting dignitary. The entire experience was designed to intimidate, to reinforce the power imbalance before a single word was spoken. They drove not to a public restaurant, but to a private, exclusive club overlooking the city, a place of hushed tones, dark wood, and old money. Eleanor was waiting for her at a secluded table in the corner, a glass of iced water with a single slice of lemon in front of her. She was exactly as Lena remembered, impeccably dressed, her silver hair styled in a perfect chignon, her face a mask of polite indifference. She looked at Lena's simple work blouse and trousers with the same faint air of disapproval she had 9 years ago. "Lena," she said, her voice as cool and smooth as river stones, "thank you for coming." "I'm not sure I had a choice," Lena replied, sitting down. A thin smile touched Eleanor's lips. "There's always a choice. It's the consequences that are fixed. I imagine you're wondering why I asked you here. I have a few ideas." The waitress appeared, and Eleanor ordered a seared salmon salad for them both without consulting Lena, another subtle assertion of control. Once they were alone again, Eleanor steepled her fingers on the table. "My son has informed me of his generous offer, a house, a trust. It's a substantial olive branch." "It's a substantial business proposal," Lena countered, deciding to meet the attack head-on. "I've read about Sterling Industries' financial difficulties, the failed expansion, the rumors of a merger." Eleanor's expression didn't flicker. She gave a slight nod, a concession from one intelligent player to another. "You've done your homework. I would have been disappointed if you hadn't. Then you understand that stability is of the utmost importance to us right now. And by stability you mean a male heir to parade in front of your potential business partners." "Crude, but accurate," Eleanor said without a hint of shame. "Legacy, family, succession, these are not just sentimental concepts, Lena. In our world, they are assets. A visible, viable next generation demonstrates long-term planning. It inspires confidence. Leo is a fortunate discovery at an opportune time." The cold, transactional way she spoke about her own grandson made Lena's stomach churn. "He's a child, not a commodity." "He is a Sterling," Eleanor corrected her, "and that comes with both privilege and responsibility. We are offering him the former. In time, he will come to understand the latter." The food arrived, but Lena couldn't imagine eating. This was worse than she had thought. Nathaniel's deception was one thing. He was at least conflicted, haunted by his past actions. This woman felt nothing. It was all a cold, hard calculation. Nathaniel tells me the boy is bright. Interested in robotics, Eleanor continued, delicately picking at her salmon. We can nurture that. We can give him opportunities you can only dream of. The best schools, the best connections. He will have a life of influence and meaning. All we require in return is your cooperation. And what does my cooperation entail? Lena asked, her voice dangerously quiet. You will allow Nathaniel to build a relationship with his son. You will support this relationship. You will move into the house provided, accept the financial arrangements, and present a united, stable front to the outside world. You will, in effect, play the part we require. And if I refuse? Eleanor put down her fork and met Lena's gaze. The politeness vanished, replaced by a chilling intensity. If you refuse, we will sue for paternity and full custody. We will drag you through a court battle that will bankrupt you emotionally and financially. Our lawyers will paint you as an unstable, unfit mother who is denying her son a relationship with his father out of spite. They will dig into every corner of your life, every late bill, every double shift you worked, every time you had to leave Leo with a neighbor. We will turn your struggle into a liability. We will bury you, and we will win. My grandson will become a sterling, with or without your consent. The only question is whether you will be a part of his new life or a bitter memory. It was a declaration of war, a brutal, soul-crushing display of power. Lena felt the floor drop out from under her. She had come here expecting a negotiation. This was an ultimatum, delivered with the casual cruelty of a queen ordering an execution. She finally understood. Nathaniel's offer wasn't the first move in the game. It was the last. It was the generous offer they would tell the courts she had refused. They had already planned for her defiance. They had prepared for her destruction. Her choice was simple: the gilded cage or a scorched earth battle she could not possibly win. The meeting with Eleanor left Lena feeling hollowed out, as if her bones had been scooped clean. The rage was still there, but it was now overlaid with a cold, terrifying dread. She had been checked from every angle. Eleanor's threats weren't idle. They were a meticulously planned strategy. She went home and tried to act normal, but the pretense was a thin, brittle shell. Leo, perceptive as always, noticed immediately. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked, as she numbly went through the motions of making dinner. She wanted to protect him, to shield him from the ugliness of it all, but she knew she couldn't. He was a part of this, the unwitting pawn at the center of the board. She sat him down at the table, the same table where their life had been upended, and told him everything. She didn't spare him the details of Eleanor's threats, the coldness in her voice, the talk of custody battles and turning their life into a weapon against them. As he listened, Leo's face hardened. The youthful optimism of the past week vanished, replaced by a grim maturity. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was the son of Lena Petrova and the grandson of Eleanor Sterling, caught in the crossfire between two worlds. "So, we have to do it?" he asked quietly when she was finished. "We have to take the house." Lena nodded, the admission a bitter pill. "I don't see another way, Leo. I can't fight them. I can't risk losing you." The new house was as magnificent and sterile as she had imagined. A modern architectural marvel of glass and steel, nestled in the forested West Hills, with panoramic views of the city below. It had 4 bedrooms, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine, and a living room so large their old apartment could fit inside it twice over. It was a palace, and it felt like a prison. The first few weeks were a blur of disorientation. Movers, arranged and paid for by Sterling Industries, packed up their small life and transplanted it into this vast, empty space. Their worn furniture looked comical and lost in the cavernous rooms. Nathaniel was a constant, carefully managed presence. He would come for dinner twice a week, bringing expensive takeout from restaurants they could never have afforded. He and Leo would retreat to the garage, now being outfitted as a state-of-the-art workshop, and talk for hours about circuits and code. Lena watched these interactions from a distance, her heart a tangled knot of resentment and a strange, painful gratitude. She hated Nathaniel for forcing this life on them, but she couldn't deny the change in Leo. A new confidence was blooming in her son. He was animated, challenged, and excited about the future in a way he hadn't been before. He was connecting with the father he had never known, and that connection was real, regardless of the cynical motives that had sparked it. This new reality created a subtle but painful rift between mother and son. Lena's coldness toward Nathaniel was a constant source of tension. "Why are you always like that with him?" Leo asked one evening after a particularly strained dinner where Lena had answered Nathaniel's questions with monosyllabic replies. "Like what?" she asked defensively. "So angry. He's trying, Mom. He's here almost every day. He's teaching me things, helping me with my MIT application." "He's doing what his mother told him to do, Leo. It's a performance." "It doesn't feel like a performance." Leo's voice rose, laced with frustration. "When we're in the workshop and he's explaining gear ratios, he's not performing. He's just a dad. Maybe it started as a business thing, but it's not that anymore. Can't you see that?" "What I see," Lena said, her voice trembling slightly, "is the man who abandoned us. What I see is a family that threatened to take you away from me. I'm sorry if I can't just forget that and play happy families." "Nobody's asking you to forget." Leo stood up, his lanky frame filled with a sudden, forceful energy. "But you're not even trying. It's like you want to be miserable. It's like you'd rather we were back in the old apartment, struggling just so you could keep hating him. Did you ever think that maybe this is better for me? That maybe I want a father? This isn't just about you anymore, Mom." His words struck her with the force of a physical slap. He was right. In her focus on the betrayal, on the fight against the Sterlings, she had made it all about her own pain. She was so wrapped up in protecting the life they had that she hadn't considered the life Leo wanted. She saw him as a victim to be shielded, but he was seeing himself as a young man with a sudden, incredible opportunity. She had been looking at the situation through the lens of the past 9 years. He was looking at it through the lens of the next 9. The realization was a profound and painful emotional shift. Her anger had been a shield, but it was also a blindfold. It had protected her from being hurt again, but it was also preventing her from seeing the complex, evolving reality of their situation. Nathaniel might have returned for selfish reasons, but was it possible that something real was growing from those toxic seeds? Could a man's motives change? That night, she sat alone in the vast, silent living room, the city lights twinkling below like a blanket of fallen stars. She was still a prisoner in a gilded cage, but for the first time she considered the possibility that for her son it wasn't a cage at all. It was a launching pad. And maybe, just maybe, her role wasn't to fight the warden, but to help her son learn how to fly. The breaking point came during a tense Sunday brunch at the Sterling Mansion in Seattle. It was the first time Lena and Leo had been summoned to the family's ancestral home, a sprawling Gothic estate that seemed to suck the very light from the sky. The merger was in its final stages, and Eleanor wanted to present the complete family to a few key board members from the acquiring company. The entire event was a masterclass in passive aggression. Eleanor was gracious on the surface, but her every comment to Lena was a thinly veiled jab at her background, her clothes, her life before the Sterlings had so generously intervened. Nathaniel was on edge, a walking personification of stress. He hovered near Leo, pointing out family portraits and explaining their lineage, his voice tight and rehearsed. He was performing, and for the first time, Leo seemed to see the strings. The crucial moment happened in the study, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound books that looked as though they'd never been opened. One of the board members, a shrewd man named Mr. Abernathy, turned to Leo. "So, young man," he said with a paternalistic smile, Your father tells me you're quite the prodigy with robotics, planning to follow in his footsteps at Sterling Industries. Leo looked uncomfortable. I want to go to MIT first, for engineering. Eleanor stepped in smoothly. Of course, a Sterling man always gets the finest education before taking his rightful place in the company. He's the future of our legacy. She placed a proprietary hand on Leo's shoulder. The word legacy was a key, unlocking a quiet fury in Leo. He shrugged her hand off, a small but significant act of rebellion. With all due respect, Mrs. Sterling, he said, his voice clear and steady, my future is my own. My father is helping me pursue it. That's all. Abernathy raised an eyebrow, and Eleanor's smile tightened by a millimeter, the only sign of her displeasure. Later, as they were leaving, the facade finally cracked. In the grand foyer, away from the guests, Eleanor rounded on Nathaniel. Lena and Leo were a few feet away, ostensibly waiting for the car, but they heard every venomous word. What was that? Eleanor hissed, her voice a low whisper of fury. The boy is defiant. You were supposed to have him under control. He is an asset, Nathaniel, not a pet project. He needs to understand his role. His role is to be my son, Mother, Nathaniel shot back, his own voice strained. Not a bargaining chip. He is whatever we need him to be to save this family, she retorted. I did not bring you back into the fold. I did not clean up your messes and pave your way to the top for you to develop a sudden sentimental streak. You will handle the boy, or I will. The raw, undisguised cruelty of her words, the complete dismissal of Leo as a human being, was breathtaking. But it was Nathaniel's reaction that truly shocked Lena. For years she had seen him as a coward who had buckled under his mother's pressure. But now she saw something else in his face. Not fear, but a deep, simmering resentment, a self-loathing that had been brewing for a decade. He looked from his mother's cold, unforgiving face to Leo, who was standing by the door, watching them, his expression one of complete disillusionment. In that moment, Nathaniel Sterling finally made a choice. It wasn't the choice he made 9 years ago in a fit of youthful panic. This was the choice of a man who had lived with the consequences and could no longer bear the cost. No, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. You won't. You will not speak to him or about him like that ever again. This deal, this merger, it's not worth it. Eleanor stared at him, aghast. Have you lost your mind? This is everything. It's the family legacy. What legacy? Nathaniel's voice cracked with emotion. A legacy of threats and manipulation. A legacy of buying and selling people. I already sold my soul once to protect it. I will not sell my sons. He turned his back on his stunned mother, walked over to Lena and Leo, and his eyes, for the first time, were stripped of all artifice. They were filled with a profound, pleading shame. I'm sorry, he said, his voice hoarse, directed at both of them. She's right. This all started because I needed to save the company. I needed an heir to secure the deal. I came back for the wrong reasons. But it's not about that anymore. Seeing him, he glanced at Leo, getting to know him. I can't do it. I won't let her use him. He pulled a phone from his pocket, his hands shaking slightly. He dialed a number. Mr. Abernathy, he said, his voice gaining strength. Nathaniel Sterling. I'm afraid I have to withdraw my family from the merger negotiations. Personal reasons. Yes, I understand the consequences. Goodbye. He hung up. In the cavernous, silent foyer, the finality of that click echoed like a gunshot. He had just detonated his company, his inheritance, his entire life's work, to protect the son he had once abandoned. He looked at Lena, his face pale, expecting her to say, I told you so. He expected anger, vindication, scorn. But Lena felt something else entirely. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a very long time. A grudging, astonished respect. The coward she remembered was gone. In his place was a man who had just set fire to his gilded cage, and the price of his freedom was everything. The drive back to Portland was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than the one that had filled their lives for the past month. The old silence had been heavy with unspoken resentments and simmering tension. This new silence was one of shock, uncertainty, and the fragile beginnings of a new reality. Nathaniel drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He had said nothing since the explosive confrontation with his mother. He had simply escorted them to the car, gotten in, and started driving as if on autopilot. They didn't go back to the house in the West Hills. Instead, Nathaniel pulled up in front of their old apartment building, the place where it had all begun. He killed the engine, and the quiet of the car became absolute. The house, the trust, he said, not looking at them. They were tied to the company, to my position as COO. After today, they're gone. My mother will see to that. She'll cut me off completely. There was no self-pity in his voice, only a flat statement of fact. So we go back to how it was, Lena said softly. It wasn't an accusation, just an observation. Yes, he said. I'm sorry, Leo. I offered you the world and all I did was show you how ugly it is. Leo, who had been staring out the window, finally spoke. You stood up to her, he said, his voice filled with a quiet awe. You chose me. Nathaniel finally turned, his face etched with a decade of regret. It's the only choice I should have ever made. I was just 9 years too late. Lena looked at the two of them, the father and son silhouetted by the dim streetlights. The power dynamics had been irrevocably scrambled. The wealth, the influence, the threats, they had all evaporated in a single phone call. Nathaniel Sterling was no longer a corporate titan. He was just a man who had lost everything. And in doing so, he had gained something back. It's not gone, Lena found herself saying, surprising even herself. The trust. The lawyers I work for, they're small, but they're smart. The offer was made to Leo in a legally binding document. It was contingent on you establishing a relationship in good faith. I'd argue that blowing up $1 billion merger to protect your son from your manipulative family is the very definition of good faith. She can't touch it. Nathaniel stared at her, his mouth slightly agape. In all his calculations, in all his fear of his mother's retribution, he had overlooked the one thing he'd never truly appreciated: Lena's sharp, pragmatic intelligence. The house is in the company's name, he said, slowly processing. They'll take it back. Fine, Lena said. We never liked that house anyway. It was like living in a museum. She looked at Leo. But the trust is yours, for your education, for your future. It's the one good thing to come out of this mess, and you've earned it. This was her move, her turn to set the terms. The power was no longer his or Eleanor's. It was hers. This changes things, Nathaniel, she continued, her voice firm, clear, and free of the anger that had clouded it for so long. There are no more deals, no more performances. If you want to be in Leo's life, you can be. Not as a benefactor, not as a Sterling, just as a father. You'll come to his robotics competitions. You'll help him with his calculus. You'll meet him where he is, not where you want him to be. Those are the terms. It was a truce, not a surrender. It was a new contract, written not by lawyers, but by a mother laying down the boundaries that would define their future. Nathaniel looked as though the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. He wasn't being forgiven, but he was being given a path forward, a chance to be something more than the sum of his mistakes. He nodded slowly, a genuine, unburdened smile touching his lips for the first time. Okay, he said. Okay, Lena. Those are good terms. As they got out of the car and walked toward the familiar, slightly shabby entrance of their building, Lena felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. She had faced the Queen, and in a way she had won. Not by fighting her on her own terms, but by refusing to play the game at all. She had reclaimed her life and her son's from the clutches of the Sterling Empire. They were back where they started, in their small third-floor apartment. But everything was different. The ghosts of the past had been faced, the hidden motives had been exposed, and the psychological war was finally over. The life they had built hadn't been changed overnight by money, but by a single act of redemption, 6 months later, the rain was falling on the windows of their old apartment, but the rhythm felt different. It was no longer a lonely, melancholic beat, but a cleansing one. They had not moved. After the opulence of the West Hills house, returning to their cramped, familiar space felt less like a defeat and more like coming home. The sterling trust for Leo had remained, just as Lena predicted. Eleanor, consumed with salvaging her company in the aftermath of the failed merger, had bigger battles to fight. A letter from Lena's small firm, outlining the legal ramifications of trying to revoke the trust, had been enough to ensure her silence. The Queen had lost a pawn, but was determined to save her kingdom. Nathaniel was a regular, if still slightly awkward, presence in their lives. Stripped of his corporate title and family fortune, he was a man rebuilding himself from the ground up. He had taken a consulting job with a small tech startup, a position that utilized his sharp mind but lacked the prestige and power he was used to. He had traded his black Mercedes for a modest sedan and his tailored suits for off-the-rack shirts. The changes suited him. For the first time, he looked like a man at peace with himself. He never came bearing extravagant gifts anymore. Instead, he brought his time. He spent Saturdays with Leo in the corner of the living room they had converted into a makeshift workshop, their heads bent together over wiring diagrams and programming manuals. He attended Leo's robotics competitions, standing in the noisy, crowded high school gyms, cheering as loudly as any other parent. He was learning slowly and humbly how to be a father. His relationship with Lena was a quiet, careful truce. The deep wounds of the past had not magically healed. There was no romantic reconciliation, no fairy tale ending. But the bitterness that had defined their interactions for so long had softened into a kind of mutual respect. They were two people bound together by their shared love for their son, navigating a new, complicated normal. They could sit at the same table and talk about Leo's future without the ghosts of betrayal hovering between them. One Tuesday evening, Nathaniel was over for dinner. It was ramen night. He sat at their small dining table, the same spot where he had placed the life-altering envelope half a year ago. This time, however, he was helping Leo solve a particularly tricky calculus problem. You have to find the derivative of the outer function first, then multiply it by the derivative of the inner function, Nathaniel explained, sketching it out on a napkin. It's the chain rule. Leo's eyes lit up in understanding. Oh, right, I get it. Lena watched them from the stove, a small, genuine smile on her face. Her life was still a balance of work and bills. She was still tired most days. But the crushing weight of doing it all alone was gone. The fortress she had built for two now had a visitor who, against all odds, had earned the right to knock on the door. Later, as Nathaniel was leaving, he paused in the hallway. "Thank you, Lena," he said, his voice quiet. "For what?" "For letting me back in and for everything." "You did the hard part, Nathaniel," she replied, her voice equally soft. "You chose him." He nodded, a flicker of the old pain and the new peace crossing his face. "Best business decision I ever made." She closed the door behind him and leaned against it, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall. The rain continued its gentle patter against the glass. It wasn't the end of their story, but a new beginning. Redemption, she realized, wasn't a grand dramatic event. It was a slow, quiet process. It was showing up day after day. It was choosing love over legacy and connection over a contract. Their life hadn't been changed overnight, but it had been transformed, slowly and profoundly, into something new, something hopeful, something real. And so, a new dawn breaks, not with a sudden flash of light, but with the quiet, steady rhythm of a life being rebuilt. The story of Lena, Leo, and Nathaniel shows us that redemption isn't about erasing the past, but about having the courage to write a new future, one day at a time. What do you think is the true meaning of family? Is it blood, or is it the choices we make every single day? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, Please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who appreciates a deep, emotional journey. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. Thank you for watching.